think that how math works in the Montessori environment is one of the biggest questions I get all the time from people, parents, outsiders looking into our classroom. It's not as based in worksheets or in solving rote problems as you think. In fact, just yesterday I was asked, do the children get homework? Do they have to go home and solve a bunch of math problems? And I said,
No.
not really. That's what they work on in school.
Mm-hmm. Part of the confusion with math is that the materials look so different, right? How we teach math starts with a lot of hands-on work, and these are big, brightly colored pieces of material in the classroom that the children work through, and it's impossible to take those home, right? So much of it starts with things that you can actually manipulate and get your hands on and see what does it look like to multiply, what does it actually look like to have a number go from smaller to bigger because you've been multiplying it, or from large to small because you're dividing it. And when you're actually doing that with beads or I don't know, squares or some other material in front of you, it really drives the point home. But
Absolutely.
It can be hard to see that if you've never been trained in math that way before.
We talk a lot about taking those materials and working towards a goal. I think that goal is abstraction, which is like this paperless understanding of math. In the same way that we use a calculator today to solve a lot of our math problems, children are actually able to use their brain to solve a lot of math problems because they have this experience with the materials. In fact, Mrs. Manak, the head of schools today, said, make sure they know their times tables, right? That's something we're all familiar with, writing down 2, 4, 6, 8. But children a lot of times can memorize that, and they can remember it. They can even kind of internalize it and carry it with them, so that when they see a math problem on paper, they're able to just blurt out the answer. We do that a lot by practicing, again, like Randy said, bead bar multiplication. There's a lot of names that we use in the Montessori, like the checkerboard that you might hear. I think a lot of this stuff is more for children, that they think it's more of a game to go solve for multiplication problems. So we call it a checkerboard, right? It sounds like a game to them. We do the same thing with division. We do a lot of division work in the lower elementary, leading up to bigger things like squaring, cubing, square rooting, cube rooting. I can go on and on with the subjects, right?
I think something fun about Montessori math is that we put a lot of trust in the children. That there's this sort of expectation that math is something that everyone can do, and that even coming in as a 6-year-old, that there's more trust, there's more capacity than we might have in a traditional education setting. One of the very first, probably the first math work that we do with lower elementary to come in at 6 years old is to learn about the hierarchies, right? We learn about 100,000 and 10,000 and the million and the units and tens, and we learn from the unit, which is 1, all the way through the 100 millions, right? And we can actually, we have materials that show what that looks like and how that changes. And so you have 6-year-olds who know exactly what 100,000 is and what that means, and that there are 10,000s in a 100,000, and that's how we start. That's the beginning of it. And so they start math with this idea of how big numbers can get and what a big number means versus just this sort of traditional, it's on paper, there are 6 zeros, okay, that's big, but what does that actually look like? If we get your hands on that drives the point home a little bit more. And I think it shows a lot of trust in a 6-year-old that we start them there.
I mean, Maria Montessori found, I think we find in our daily work here, that children's capacity, especially with math, at this age, she calls it a mathematic mind, a reasoning mind. They're always trying to solve these problems. We can give them the physical materials to do that at a young age. They start in the primary at 3 years old, and by the time they're 9, moving up into upper elementary at 10, I mean, they're doing things on paper that I probably didn't learn until middle school. So.
And they trust themselves too. I don't have any students who think they're bad at math or who don't like math. Math is fun, it's game-like. Most of the lessons feel like a game. And if you win, you get the problem right, which is fun. And if they don't win, they usually will want to do the problem over again so they can get the right answer. And it's not an intimidating, scary, painful thing the way that it was for me growing up. Because I hated math growing up, and here it's delightful. So that's a big difference.